Hi, my name is Deldelp Medina, and welcome to the panel about entrepreneurship. I'm really excited to be here. My name, as I mentioned, is Deldelp Medina. I'm the Executive Director of Black and Brown Founders, and I'm here with three amazing powerhouses who are building companies that I have been peeping at and taking a look at just out of curiosity, because I think entrepreneurship is one of those things that really can be really impactful, not only for us individually, but for the community overall. But we also know that it takes a special kind of personality to want to take that risk. So I'm wondering, Carolyn, could you be kind enough to start us off with introductions, and then we'll go on from there, Yscaira and Amanda.
Happy to. Hi, everybody. I'm Carolyn Rodz. I am the co-founder and CEO at Hello Alice. Also a proud supporter of Black and Brown Founders. Love you guys. Hello Alice is a free platform for all small business owners, helping to connect what we call the new majority of entrepreneurs, but the fastest growing segments of business owners to the resources that they need to start and grow their companies. So at every step of this very confusing journey, we're matching owners to grant opportunities and funding and tools and resources and mentors and expertise, all based on their personal profile and their business profile, helping to make sense of the journey and frankly, helping more entrepreneurs achieve success. So our goal is to have equitable access to all of the many great resources that are out there, but also to make sense of, frankly, what's a really confusing journey.
My name is Yscaira. I am the founder of LaborX, the LinkedIn for the linked out, and we connect folks who go through alternative education to good jobs in the knowledge economy. So tech and beyond, basically jobs that not only pay a living wage, but a thriving wage. And a lot of the work we do is working with companies to get them to think beyond the degree and look at the whole person using competency-based models, so you can hire people based on their actual skills and their potential, as opposed to who they know, who referred them, where they went to school. Thank you for having me, Del.
Thank you.
My name is Amanda. I'm the founder of Fiveable. We are an edtech platform. We support high school students with studying. And so it's really about creating online communities, building student-friendly resources that can actually reach all students and are accessible, and making learning fun. You know, we're really focused on AP classes right now, but trying to just kind of change the narrative for a lot of students that don't see themselves as part of those like rigorous spaces, but trying to, we want them to be able to see that they can do it, and that it might be hard, but it's worth it.
Yeah. The other thing that I want to note about all three of the companies that you are all, leaders in, is that you are also hitting some key points at this moment in time, not only in terms of the pandemic that we're in the middle of. So I just want to acknowledge that, but also the economic downturn, a lot of the effects that this, having to be sheltered in place and keep ourselves safe. Knowing fully well that we're one of the communities that's leading in terms of folks getting sick. So I just want to acknowledge that because I think like this is part of the reason I think the work that all three of you are doing is supremely important. And so Amanda, I want to kick off and say, like, often when people are looking at creating a tech or tech-enabled business, that MVP, so that minimal viable product, is a place that people start off as saying, what is the thing that we know where we'll have folks that are interested in having customers? What was your first MVP like, and what is your actual product like today, and what's been that journey?
Yeah. So I was a teacher before becoming a founder, and because of that, I didn't have any tech background, so I'm not technical. So when it came to our first MVP, there were students that were emailing me, former students, asking me for help, and it was like, Ms. D, you got to help us. We're all about to fail this upcoming AP US history exam. So for me, it was like, okay, I need to figure out a way that I can help them tomorrow. I don't know how to code. I don't know how to build different things. I don't have time to find a developer. So what can I piece together that can support them first, right? Like that was what I was trying to see, is like, could I actually help them? So my very first platform was kind of a hacked together version of, I had like Teachable. I was trying to like live stream, and I wanted to be able to have kids like watch the streams and keep track of them with all the recordings. And so I basically used like Teachable and a webinar platform, and then like an email management platform, and just kind of pieced them all together. Started to learn like Zapier to kind of hack those things together even more. And so in the early days, it really was a lot of third-party platforms that allowed me to test a lot of things fast and move quickly, because I wanted to create the best supports for students. And the biggest thing about an MVP is that you're just doing it like the fastest, the cheapest way. And so now we've built out a lot more of the platform with code, and we have developers and our own web app. But if we had done that too early, we would have gotten a lot of things wrong, right? We didn't know exactly what was going to be the best version of it. And so we're still iterating all the time, but it was important to just kind of, and even now, even with like internal tools or new features, any way that we can just test things out with some type of prototype or some, you know, early version, just to see if the idea works, really saves a lot of time and energy later on.
Yeah, fantastic. Yscaira, I know that you've been in this journey for a little bit longer, and I'm curious, like, what was that initial minimal viable product? What do you have today, and what's been the growth and learning that you've had in between?
Sure. So for us, you know, the world didn't necessarily need another recruiting platform. Like, there's so many out there. But the limitations of those platforms is that they were primarily serving either a recent college grad or like someone that went through the college process and got a degree, and or someone who was very well connected, someone who already knew people at those companies who would put in a referral. And in essence, you know, we spent a lot of time trying to understand the problem. The problem for us was that it didn't really matter whether you could do the job. What mattered at the end of the day is if this recruiter is looking at 100 resumes, how is she, it's usually a she, how is he, they, filtering and deciding which 10 resumes to really spend time on and which 3 people to invite for an interview. And, you know, all of the tools that they were using were not benefiting people who didn't have strong networks, who didn't. And so you couldn't even get your foot in the door for that first screen if you didn't have certain keywords like this school, this GPA, whatever. If your resume didn't have the activities and interests of the dominant culture of that company. So it wasn't necessarily like a platform play per se. We needed to change the narrative with the job seekers that we were serving. So I said, you know, this is an issue of how do we get someone to tell their story before a recruiter decides to pick up the phone and give them a chance. So we decided our MVP was doing video resumes. So we basically got a camera, took a professional headshot of this person. In 30 minutes, you know, we interview the person, we help them come up with a script, like basically their elevator pitch to tell me about yourself, like the things that you want someone to get from that initial phone screen. And so, you know, your passion, your journey, how did you get to where you are, and what are you looking to do, are kind of like the 3 big things. And then we turned on a camera, we filmed this. And so we built a very basic website then where we put 10 profiles of 10 job seekers who had graduated from a vocational program in the Bronx. And that's where I grew up. That's home base, or was home base for me. And we started shopping it around. You know, it wasn't like the sexiest anything in the world, but we had a story. So everyone had a video resume and a traditional resume. And we were able to get one of these candidates an interview at Google. And so we got feedback from the recruiters at Google. They're like, wow, we would have never devoted any recruiting resources to recruit someone from a vocational program in the Bronx. But this video resume is really impressive. you know, this individual person's story captured me. I want to learn more about this person. And so this was like our demo. This wasn't even, you know, I knew these 10 folks were looking for jobs, but I didn't have big aspirations. And I was like, oh, we can build a pool here in the Bay Area of 10. They're like, no, we want to interview that guy that you demoed with, you know, this video that we saw. We were captivated by his story. And so then from there, we got feedback and they came back to us. This person made it through like 5 interviews at Google, and they're like, you know, your hit rate of 10 to 1 is a lot better than us. You know, we have to look at hundreds and thousands before anyone makes it that far down our, you know, down our pipeline or our process. So it'd be really interesting for us if you find the best graduates at the best training programs and then, you know, kind of aggregate all those for us. Because part of our struggle is, you know, we support Europe, but we never heard of this other program that you brought someone with, and we don't care where they are. We'll fly people, we'll relocate people. So that was a journey for our MVP. And then from there, you know, we started adding other things that you know, that spoke beyond whether someone had a degree or not, whether someone knew them. It's okay, I've been trained, I have this certification, I have these skills, here are my work samples. So then we started building a digital portfolio for people. And that's that was our journey to our MVP. But it was really, you know, initially a lot of the features of like matching and the algorithms, it was just a bunch of back and forth over email. It's like, here's a video, here's a resume of someone, take a look at them. And if you like them, then I'll schedule the interview, I'll do the follow-up, I'll check in with that person and see if they're happy, I'll check in with you and see if, you know, if you are happy. And then we kind of started automating a lot of the stuff we were doing with spreadsheets. But you know, the pain point really wasn't about the technology per se. It was about a narrative shift that this person is qualified, and your proxies are flawed, and you're missing great talent if you keep using these algorithms that are just thinning people out based on who recommended them or where they went to school.
Well, thank you for that. Now, Caroline, what I think is interesting about Hello Alice is that I know that you guys always wanted to make sure, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember when you were about to launch or just launched, and the whole idea of having a resource center for small businesses I thought was so fantastic, because the following statement is only my own and only reflects that of my opinion and nobody else, but what's been shocking to me during this whole downturn, pandemic, shelter in place, is that the Small Business Administration is completely been silent. And that's been shocking to me because, I mean, like, they're one of the few parts of the government that's supposed to be relatively neutral and has a huge outreach across the US. And so I've been very heartened and joyful at times, the fact that you all have taken on some of this work that without necessarily the hundreds of millions of dollars that goes into a huge national program, but you've really been able to make an impact. And so I'm curious, like, when you realize, like, you went from, like, we have this idea, we know that there's a need out there, and I agreed on your need, and now what has been your response to COVID? And if you could talk through a little bit about that, because I found that to be really interesting to see, like, you've all been able to respond in a way that very few institutions actually have.
Yeah, I think for us, and it sounds similar to Yscaira and Amanda, I think your journeys is we recognize the problems that I think were highlighted during COVID long before COVID. We experienced them ourselves as small business owners. I ran 2 companies prior to Hello Alice, and it was really the solution to what I wish I would have had when I started my first business. And so I really always build, every time we're thinking about new features and new things we're developing, first and foremost, I think about, what do I want? What did I want as an owner? What was really lacking? And I felt like there was this massive gap between everything happening in Silicon Valley and the tech world and everything that was happening around the small business narrative. And the reality is we all need to build our companies that way. We all need to think, you know, in iterative thinking. We all need to think about, how do we stay scrappy, and, you know, how do we build these MVPs? How do we do all these things? Small business wasn't having that conversation at all. They were still being taught to go put together, you know, a 50-page business plan and take it to their banker. And that's so outdated. And so for us, I think frankly, I feel like we've been building for this moment. It's funny because we keep hearing we're like in the right place at the right time. And I'm like, I don't know, we were here 4 years ago and was at the right place at the right time. But I think it all prepped us for this moment. In terms of the COVID response for us, we've known, our data's always shown us that funding is first and foremost the greatest need of small business owners. Secondary to that is customer acquisition, which is really a means to an end to build that top line revenue. But at the end of the day, small business owners want money. And so we had already prepared a grants program that we were planning to launch before COVID. And so the second COVID hit, we obviously pivoted everything, deployed emergency grants. I think because we were such an early mover in it, we deployed grants literally days after shelter in place happened. It brought a lot of other attention because big organizations just weren't set up to do it. And so we had a ton of people come through us, we still do, saying, how do we use your technology to get this out in an equitable way, where we're making sure we're actually giving it to diverse owners, and we're putting it in the hands of the people that can frankly help their companies survive. So that was a huge piece. The other is just putting the resources in a way that's meaningful to various segments. And so, you all talked about MVPs. We're always sort of testing new things and figuring out better ways to do stuff. But we've always had city guides. We've done a lot of disaster response work in communities that have been hit by natural disasters. The pandemic, frankly, was just a way to take those same learnings and apply them nationally because everybody was facing a disaster. And so we set up community centers. We had, different microsites that we set up for Latino founders or for Black business owners or for veterans, trying to pull in the grants and opportunities and things that were popping up on a daily basis for them specifically, and really kind of group those together in interesting ways. We helped put how-to guides together on how to access PPP and EADL loans and all of that. So I think it's always just sort of that scrappiness that you all talked about in building your MVPs, taking that and constantly applying it to every situation that arises for your audience, because that to me is the mentality that helps you, frankly, look at opportunities that are right in front of you, but also test quickly and get results quickly and hear what your owners need. If you're there for your owners, that's the greatest way that you're going to help build that loyalty and grow over the long haul.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I want to bring us to this idea of pivot. So let's bring forward this concept of pivot. Pivot is the idea that you had, you've built something and you thought the ideal customer or the ideal group of people that you're going to be engaging with or partners that you're going to be engaging with are this group of people. And then suddenly you realize, actually, they might not be. Based upon the data I have in front of me and the information and the engagement that I'm having, I'm actually not getting through here. I might need to take the same sort of concept and like move it somehow. And I'm curious if the three of you had a moment where you were like, ooh, this wasn't exactly what we thought it was going to be. And so this is how we're going to move this, and having that shift. So to me, it's a pivot in particular is also a mental shift for the founders and the folks that are like on the ground building things, because so often we become attached to a concept that we have or a perspective that we have. And so we really have to like reevaluate our mental models of who we think we're engaging. And I'm wondering if you all have an example of that. Amanda, I know that you're in particular in education, but did you think I'm going to start with this group and then I ended up with this? Like, was there a moment in which you had to have a shift? And then we'll go to Yscaira and Carolyn.
Yeah, there's definitely been that moment. And I mean, I think there's been like a series of those moments, and sometimes they're not like dramatic, but for us, there was one that was more important than others, where we knew that we wanted to serve students, that building content for students was going to be important, finding as many students as we could through Google search, like through free resources. Like, I think it's really difficult when you start, like in ed tech businesses, it's difficult because it's like similar to the other platforms as well. It's just, we're creating a product for students, but if we charge for that content, then we're creating inequities. We're really just like making them worse. And so when we first started out, we had our live streams free, and that was helping us to acquire students, but also made the actual like product itself very accessible. And then what we had started doing was selling the replays. And so that was a business model that we had started with, and we had like a monthly membership around the replays. And we did that for about 9 months, where we were really trying to we felt like it was right, and we wanted to get it to work. And then it was somewhere at the end of 2019, there was like this moment where I think I felt it first, where I just was like, this isn't working and this isn't right. And I don't know exactly where to go. Like, I don't know what the business model should be. I know we're doing X, Y, and Z right. Like the kids love these pieces and we're reaching them, but this business model is not working. And so I actually wrote up a memo. I think it was like 2 a.m. or something. I'm just like, I don't know, it just kind of hits. And so I wrote up a whole like doc of just like how I was thinking and why, and gave that to my team. And then we spent like a lot of days just like sitting down thinking, like, we essentially were deciding whether or not to just totally kill our one source of revenue, which wasn't doing great, but it was our only source of revenue. And we eventually came to the conclusion that we just needed to stop it. Like, that was not going to take us to where we wanted to go. And so then we like looped in investors, because it still was like, it was a big decision. And by the time that we made that choice, we had been writing all these study guides, moving towards like even adding another tier on the membership. And instead of going that way, we just decided, like, we're not doing memberships and we're not going to sell the content. The live streams might be something we charge for. We weren't even sure how we would go forward, but we just knew that what we were doing was not right. And what's crazy is that by the time we actually launched that shift, it was like 3 weeks before COVID hit. And we were thinking like, well, we're going to be like the one edtech platform this spring that has like free resources. And then of course, like, everybody shifted, which we're obviously part of a massive wave of edtech success. But I think that the moment where there's just like there's a gut feeling that happens. Like, there's a lot of data, there's conversations that happen before that, but I think you like have to be able to take action on that gut feeling as soon as possible, because the longer you've built these structures, and everything about your business is a construct, right? Like, it doesn't have to be that way. These don't have to be your customers. This doesn't have to be your messaging. This doesn't have to be the tech that you use or the person that you're working with. Like, none of it has to be that way, but you have a problem that you're trying to solve. And so for us, it was always just like, whatever it takes to get to a point where we're solving this problem and building a sustainable business. And so if something's not working, we need to shift, and we need to shift quickly, because that's still going to take time to figure out how to get the pieces to fit together.
Yeah, there's a little bit of non-attachment that you have to have, knowing fully well that you want to make an impact. And I think like that's a mental practice that you have to have.
Yeah.
I'm curious of like that moment where you're like, my gut knows the following, because I think like the way that Amanda put it was so interesting. Like, my gut knew that I had to make this decision, and then here's the data that I use to actually like make an informed decision.
Yeah, so I would say for us, I'm going to reframe the framing of pivot. And, we had a roadmap from the beginning, right? There's this vision that we initially are going to start with the low-hanging fruit, which is trying to place people who've already gone through training, right? So 2/3 of our workforce doesn't have a 4-year degree, but a percentage of those folks have been alternatively trained. When we became live, basically, we started seeing that about half of the job seekers signing up to LaborX weren't coming from our partner training program. So they, in essence, hadn't been trained. And so there was a lot of demand there. And we had built this whole business around matching people who are already trained, because we can vouch for their skills or for their programs. And so it was always part of our vision that we were going to start kind of at the tip of the funnel with people who are already trained, and then build a third side to our marketplace, right? So we started with job seekers and employers. And then once we started building these partnerships with training partners, we'd build a third side, which is for training partners to track the outcomes of their job seekers. And then once we had them there, then we would open up to job seekers, who hadn't been trained, and try and match them to training. And so that was from day one, part of our vision. COVID hit, and then what happened is the equation changed, right? So we were here trying to match people to jobs. We were projecting 11 million unfilled jobs in the next 5 years, and now like massive layoffs and, a contraction of the hiring space. But then what you had were some interesting dynamics. You had every program was forced to go online. So if they couldn't, they shut down. Most of them figured out, and this, I work in a very low, like the workforce ecosystem is very low tech. Like, so on the supply side of people we work with. And so they were all forced to go online, which opened up new opportunities. We started seeing customers, our trading partners tell us, you know, now we're not constrained by space, right? Before we only had access to these classrooms and these many seats of how many people we can actually afford to train because we only have these many instructors. And now they're like, we're doing this digital, so actually we can serve more people. And for us, so that was, you know, how do we help our customer? But also, you know, how do we help the moment, right? You had now 40 million newly unemployed people who didn't know when they were going to get their jobs back, if they were going to get their jobs back. And so the opportunity of potentially reskilling people or upskilling people meant that, you know, we're sitting on this marketplace of trainers that we're not really trying to help people into yet. That was further down on our roadmap. And so we accelerated that. So we reached out to our providers and we said, you know, there are a lot more people without jobs. There's a bigger opportunity to train them. You have a lot more capacity to do that now because you're not constrained by brick and mortar space, you know, and other things like that. Is this something, you know, would this be useful if we build the capacity to match you to talent? I mean, to learners now, to students. And they're like, oh my God. And this was like pent up demand. It wasn't even, you know, something that we had like deprioritized because we're like, the number one goal is to get people jobs. Well, if we help the trainers be more efficient. So anyway, so for us, it was an acceleration and a reprioritization of something that was further down in our roadmap. I would say, you know, that came to light by the pandemic. And it's like, you know, a lot of these industries that the cloud kitchens and, you know, the digital, the hybrid training models, you know, I think we were probably in that too. It's just like the world wasn't ready to do it all at once, but then COVID kind of forced everyone to be home and do everything they did day to day from their home. And so, you know, so now we've built out this feature set. We're looking to help them, you know, they don't do social media, right? They don't do marketing. So now we're like, all right, we're going to make it so that people can apply to your programs via our platform. But what, you know, what if we also integrate into social media and blast these, you know, because right now they're like circulating a flyer within like a certain group of organizations. And I'm like, the world needs to know if there's like a free training in software engineering or cybersecurity, we're like, you know, let's get this and let's do this more efficiently. So anyway, that's kind of our journey. And so, you know, it was an interesting way to kind of focus on something that was part of our bigger vision, but wasn't top priority until all these elements started coming into place.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's interesting you were saying like the acceleration or the reprioritization of something is really important. And I know for Hello Alice in particular, like you did have sections of your platform that were there to help people and connect people. And as you mentioned, like the disaster guides that you guys had been putting out. How did COVID reprioritize, okay, that's English as a second language, there you go. Sometimes you don't pronounce words well in English.
Close enough. We know what you're saying.
And it's Heritage Month, okay? So we're celebrating.
Exactly. I'm like, perdón, a veces se me...
You're worth 2 times.
Confunden las cosas. So what was that pivot like, or like that engagement like? For me as an external partner of Hello Alice, just out of full transparency, I'm on one of your advisory boards, was really like heartening to see you all like jump into something as someone that was like connected. And I was like, oh my God, you guys are putting out so much information right now at a time where honestly, lots of institutions were completely silent. And so for that, I'm really grateful to Hello Alice and the team. But I'm curious from your point of view of like, what is that kind of systems lens change that you all had to like engage in to be able to go and say, okay, this is the need we're going to meet?
Yeah, a lot of it I think comes out of necessity. And I think we're into this time where, look, every business has had to pivot in some way because of COVID. We were actually planning our entire marketing plan. It was probably the most prepared we've ever been for a year, was 2020. And we had a huge launch that was happening at South by Southwest. We had sunk already $100,000 into that effort, which for us as a startup is a lot of money. And it didn't happen. South by Southwest was canceled. As a team, I think we were exhausted and tired, and we've been traveling nonstop and planning night and day. And, we were heartbroken. I think that it wasn't going to happen. And it was the launch of our, of a huge opportunity for us. We were really fired up. We'd pulled in a ton of partners, and we were exhausted and we were frustrated and we were sad and we felt everything. And we let ourselves kind of feel that for 24 hours. And then we said, all right, we got to figure out what's next. Like, what are we going to do? Our whole 2020, campaign had been really structured around in-person events and going city to city and doing these listening tours and all of these things. And it changed. And so we sat back and I think this is where teamwork becomes so important, because it just takes one person to bring the energy and say, all right, like, let's put our heads together and let's figure this out. We've got to move on. And that's, as the founder and as a leader of your company, I think that's a huge piece of your role. Like, you have to fake it till you make it and just feel those things. And so we did that. We put our heads together and said, okay, what's next? We didn't know at that time that we'd still be in this situation. I think in our minds, probably if we had logically thought about it, we'd know we'd still be here, but we weren't being super logical at that time. And so I think we thought it was a little bit shorter term, but we said, what do our owners need? And I think when we go back again to what do your customers need and who are you serving and what are the core things that you can do for them? To me, if you're always serving them, opportunities are going to present themselves in terms of how you run your business. I think we started our company in an interesting way, frankly, without a really strong revenue model, but we knew if these business owners succeed, a lot of people are going to make a lot of money, and there's something there, and we'll figure it out if we can figure out how to support the business owners. And so we've always really kept that core to the way that we operate, is help everybody first. We'll figure the business side out, later, because it's always, again, those opportunities are gonna, identify themselves. So I think that was the fast pivot, was just, again, pulling everyone together, moving quickly, making fast decisions, recognizing that when things change and when what you thought was going to be true isn't true, like Amanda, like you said, like, don't waste time digging into the weeds, just make the change fast, rip the Band-Aid off and push forward, because there's nothing more valuable for your company than action. You can talk all day and strategize all day, but you have to act, and you have to act quickly, but you also have to test in small ways. Don't jump into everything. Take small tests and learn and iterate and change and tweak. And I think Yscaira, sounds like a lot of what you've been doing too. But I love, the scrappiness of entrepreneurs during this time, to me, has been the greatest inspiration to us as a company, because people are making things, these restaurants that had to close and all these companies that couldn't open or opened and then closed again. And that scrappiness, like, they have figured it out and they're making it work because you have to. And that energy for me is contagious and something we apply across our team.
Yeah. So
I wanted to share just an observation. I was on a panel yesterday of Latino edupreneurs. So it was like, focused on education and new school, and just had done this research and what they learned about, particularly edupreneurs and Latinx folks in that space. And it's, we have this deep commitment to our community. And so it's not lost on me that the three entrepreneurs here are in small business, education, and workforce, and how we're basically jumping, to serve our community by design with what we do, but also when COVID hit, we're all adjusting to figure out how to meet the times for the people in our community. So I just want to celebrate that and then put that out there. So I was like, look at these three, places where we're doing this work. And it's not a coincidence. I think it's, in our fabric, who we are and how we think about our community.
That's where I think the mission becomes so important. When that North Star is so strong and clear, there's not a lot of question about what you should be doing, because I think everybody sort of sees, okay, this is the thing we have to do to push toward that mission. So I totally hear you.
Yeah, you don't get as personally attached to some of the little things, because you're way more attached to the mission. So everything you're doing to support that can change and shift and adapt as long as like you have that North Star that you're marching towards.
Yeah, I heard it put something like marry the mission and date like the solution or technology.
I love that.
That's a great way of putting it. But let's talk a little bit about money. Because in this moment in time, as you all mentioned, a lot of people are having a hard time. I know a lot of folks who have lost family members. We know that on the Black and Brown team, we're not exempt from the realities of it all. Some of us have gotten sick. We've had family members pass away. Like, it's been very painful. But there's also been a financial hit that a lot of us have taken because so often we are the friends and family to our friends and family. If somebody loses a job, an opportunity, has a bill to pay, like those of us who are better educated and who have, as my grandmother used to say, a clean job in an office, like we have to pay those bills and we have to help out. And so I'm curious about, like, when you're thinking of where you are right now, the impacts that you've made, let's talk a little bit about your business model, because I think like that also is an important conversation to have amongst ourselves within community, so that we're also showing and being transparent about, hey, getting the money is not always easy, but figuring out how to get the money is part of the process. And so, Carolyn, I was wondering if you can kick us off, because I do know that part of the work that you've had to do to be able to give people resources, access to resources, has been part of your business model. And I'm curious to see how that growth happened, or if there was a shift, and if you could share with us a little bit of what that's been about.
Yeah, I always ask our very early stage investors why on earth they invested in us, because it's been very good for them, but I'm always shocked. I'm like, how did you believe in us so early in the process? Because we didn't even really know how we were going to make money. As I mentioned, that the one thing we knew, if we were going to support equity and access, cost couldn't be a barrier for small business owners. And particularly when we look at women and people of color who are starting with much less in terms of the financial support for their business, we knew we couldn't charge them. So when we took that out of the equation, we started looking at, if these business owners succeed, who else is positioned to succeed? And we knew that was government, that was corporations that were selling products and services to these owners. We knew it was vendors, other small business vendors that were going to be supporting them. We knew there were a ton of payments and transactions happening along that whole journey. And so we started looking at where does the opportunity lie in a way that it's a win-win for everybody. And so that's how we monetize. We monetize both by helping governments and corporations better understand the small business ecosystem. So as we're learning about the small business community, we share aggregate data. We never sell individual data, but we do sell learnings and trends and insights on the broader ecosystem to those parties so that they can better support and serve. And then we also work on everything to pre-qualify a diverse pipeline for products and services and opportunities that we for those. And then we offer all of the wraparound services and support. So we make money from governments, we make money from corporations. And again, we don't have to charge the business owners. So we're very transparent with our owners about how we utilize the information that they're sharing with us, always in a way that is going to better support the ecosystem. We don't ever, give out lists or do any of that or allow people to be spammed. We know that's not in anyone's best interests. And again, it's always at the end of the day, keeping our owners first and foremost. Like that, if we have to build the trust with them, and we have to make sure that that we're serving their needs first, excuse me, before we're able to have a sustainable business model.
Amanda, you were talking about how you realized that the business model that you had at that time, in terms of like charging people for watching the stream again, the rebroadcast. Like, what business model did you land on, and where are you today?
Yeah, we've been lucky to have early investors as well that have given us time to figure some of these things out, because similar to you, like if we charge students, it creates inequity. If we charge schools, it creates inequity, because the schools that have big classes and the schools that don't have all the resources, like they're the ones who need it the most. And so some of the ways that we've landed on, and I think we're still figuring a lot of things out. So, but we know that when we have very low cost options for things that are typically much more expensive, that opens up a lot of doors. And we've started to even partner with organizations who are also working to solve the same problems we are, that can cover costs for students in their regions, in their like local schools. So the two main things that we sell right now are still about the live experiences, but we've actually just started teaching full AP courses online in like a 15-week experience. And that is something that really isn't done. And we'll be the only ones in the spring that actually offer every single AP subject, and just charge $55 for the entire course, which is like completely unheard of. But the way that I think about it is like, if a partner has a budget that they're actually willing to cover the costs, like of students in a certain region that fit their criteria, and they say, we'll give you X amount of dollars, my thinking is, how many students can I help with that amount of money, right? Like I'm really trying to like stretch that, because I want the kids to have the support through that model. And so we are much more about serving more students in like a volume sense. There's a couple of other pieces in our business that are very early, and we haven't even attempted to monetize yet in terms of what our online communities look like. Like right now, we don't have any ads. We also don't sell any kinds of data, whether it's aggregate or anything. I think there may be opportunities for us down the road to think about like branded communities and other types of ways to monetize other parts of the business. But right now, we're really just trying to figure out like, how do we build something that students love? And as we're doing that, as the kids love it, then the parents love it, and the teachers love it, and the admin love it. And so I think, over the next year and a half, like we're going to learn a lot about where we can create a business model that supports our mission and supports our business. And right now we're really lucky to have the venture funding that allows us to have this time to just build and gather up as much data as we can, and then be able to make good decisions, just like we did the last time we were able to do that. But be able to move where it really feels right, where we're going to be able to meet both of those goals.
Yscaira, do you want to finish us out in terms of like how your business model has evolved?
Yeah, and I just remembered I like misquoted that initial quote, and the quote was, marry the problem and date the solution, right? So when I think about initially building on what Carolyn said, you understand there's a problem, and you spend a lot of time trying to figure out your solution, and then how do you create value as your solution, and then your business model is how do you capture the value that you're creating, right? So monetizing that value. And I think similarly, again, we are serving our communities in many different ways. So if we're serving unemployed or underemployed people, not that you can't ever sell them something of value that you can build a business around, but for us, we knew that cost would be prohibitive. So for someone without a job, so that side of our marketplace, we always figured, we need to invest a lot in our job seekers as opposed to extract from. Not that charging always is extractive, but like in our particular case, we're like, okay, so that's how we're thinking about job seekers. Our training partners, we also thought, like Carolyn, like who stands to benefit, right? So if this job seeker gets a job, if we do everything to get this person a job, the training programs do better, right? They are able to raise more money based on their outcomes to serve more people, the ecosystem grows. And so we started looking, instead of selling directly to our training partners to use our dashboard, to get their people jobs, we looked at government and foundations, right? So the people who fund these training programs are very invested, and they want to see the SROI, which is a social return on their investment. So for every dollar that I spend putting into this, let's say year up to train this person to get a job, I want to know that this person got a job, that it was a living wage job, that, they built security for a year or two, because that's then when you start having transformational change. And so we went to the funders then to help us build ecosystems, right? So instead of like getting one partner here, we're like, okay, Annenberg Foundation or Tipping Point Foundation or Robin Hood Foundation, you all have portfolios of training partners that you invest in. And so they were invested in having these programs adopt technology to automate, accelerate, and be more efficient in this core function of placing people, and for them to have data to look back at. So that's how we started looking at that. And so, we got some of that initially philanthropic funding to get us off the ground, but then these foundations became our customers, right? So it wasn't just like they were giving us money to get it going. It was also, we're going to buy licenses, bulk licenses for a portfolio of programs that we give money to. And then we took it to the next level, which is the city, right? The city is very invested in making sure that job seekers have jobs. It costs them money for social services, and it's money being left. When you move beyond the impact of like getting someone out of poverty, this person can then become a taxpayer. So we applied for our first RFP with the city of San Francisco. We got that. Our contracts have been renewed. And so that was our journey to at least, one side of our marketplace. The other side, which has been, in full transparency, a tougher nut to crack, is the employer side. And I would say my biggest learning has been, don't always believe what your customer says they want, right? That's like entrepreneurship 101. And I don't just mean like, oh, build this feature for me and build that feature. I mean like, oh, we want diverse talent, right? Like, and here's another phrase that I learned yesterday. I'm all about stealing good phrases, is don't show me, like, if I want to get a real sense for your priorities, don't show me your press release, show me your budget. Let me see how much money you have in recruiting, not just like your figurehead of diversity and inclusion. You hire someone very smart and competent, but you don't give them the resources to do the work that you hire them to do, right? So like how much money, if it's an apprenticeship program, like how many full-time roles are we guaranteeing? What is my budget? What is my head count? So show me the money. And so for a long time in your neck of the woods, Del, and in Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion and how this is important and how the pipeline's out there. And so let's give money to colleges and to, or to like, let's push it back to elementary and middle school. And we need all that. Yes, we do. And you could just say, I'm going to hire one person, 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, and then like make that reflective in your budget. So for us, it's been more about like the motivator, at least when we've gotten companies to pay, hasn't been on it. Like, let's say pre-George Floyd racial reckoning, hasn't been really at, in a movement sort of way about hiring diverse talent. We found another lever that, which was civic engagement and also peer pressure, right? So it's like, oh, that company is doing this, so we need to be doing this, which, it's like at the core of my humanity kills it a little bit. So like they're not doing it, not even for the business case or for the moral, the moral case, but it's like, oh shoot, it's like we're not looking really good right now. But it's like, so that to me has been the journey of like trying to figure out the business, the business model, the revenue model on the employer side, because you can't always trust what your customer is telling you about their priorities. You got to see how they act and what their budget says.
Well, El que dirán has always been very powerful. What will people say? That's an important cultural trait that a lot of us have of, watching out. But as we're ending our time together, unfortunately, I do want to wrap up. And I know that we've mentioned a lot of ideas and concepts that we didn't go into depth about around investment. I'm probably sure that people have questions about like, how did you get your first sort of investment? We honestly don't have time to go down that, but there are a lot of resources out there that people can engage with to learn about how to reach out to investors. I also want to just acknowledge the fact that, for all of us, we have educational backgrounds and we have had successes in life that allow us to go then and try to build things out, and that is also a huge privilege. But taking into consideration the moment that we're in right now, the racial reckoning that we're in, the fact that COVID has affected our communities so deeply, what is the one thing that has kept you going throughout this difficult moment, both personally and as a part of your company? Because you're all leaders within companies, and sometimes that's part of leadership, is having those difficult conversations and dealing with those difficult engagement points of, making sure that your staff and the folks around you understand what is leading you. So you've all talked about making sure that you have that mission to keep you going. But as we wrap up, what is that one thing that has kept you going and has allowed your leadership to flourish? Amanda, would you start us off?
Yeah, for me, it's the students. I mean, I feel lucky to have such a strong purpose behind this business. And I think it's also been helpful in attracting people to work with us and the team. And I think, for us before COVID, like, things have been hard. It's not easy to start a business as a woman of color. It's like, there's so many obstacles and barriers. And I think every time I hit one of those barriers, every time I felt like, what am I doing? Like, I could just go get a job. Like, how can I build this? I always go back to the students who we work with, who expect us to be there for them, right? Like, they expect that we'll be there in the spring and next year. Like, they're thinking ahead to their junior, their senior year, and knowing that, like, Fiveable will be a part of their support. And so if we're not, then, like, that's the failure for me, right? So, like, they drive me all the time, because and even during COVID, like, everything about 2020, I think, all of us have kind of gone through different stages of grief and are in different stages. And I'm constantly, like, being pushed back and having to go through it again. But I think that once I got to this moment of just, like, acceptance of, like, okay, the entire world has shifted. Like, this is going to go on for a little while. Things are not going to be the same afterwards. At that point, then it starts to really feel like an opportunity for immense change. Like, we actually have this moment in education to reset a lot of what has existed for a long time, to create new opportunities, to completely reimagine the purpose of school, right? Like, so much of our, just like in our business, so all of our institutions are constructs. Like, we built them this way, and they are broken, and we've known that forever. But now it seems like people are really waking up to that, and it seems like there's a chance to actually build, for me as a teacher, as someone who's been in education for a decade now, I've been dreaming up all these different things that could shift, but never really knew if I would be able to see some of those changes in my lifetime. And now it's like, I think Carolyn had mentioned it, like, we're upping the roadmaps, right? Like, for any of our businesses, for any of our, like, dreams of what could be, whether it's in businesses, in education, in any of these systems. And so I think that's been the driver for me. It's so much bigger than just me. It's about, like, taking this moment and, like, not wasting the opportunity of what we really could achieve if we just, like, hit the gas right now. And that just, like, gets me like super jazzed, like, every day.
Great. Carolyn, do you want to go next?
I'm right with you, Amanda. I think for me, it is the small business owners. And I always go back. My first company failed. I had a ton of credit card debt. I didn't know how I was going to get out of that hole. And I go back, I hear all these stories now of business owners going through the same thing. And I get it on a really personal level. And it's one of the hardest things to go through when you've poured everything into a business and it's not working. It's incredibly, it's tough on a lot of levels. It's tough and it's scary and it's uncertain. And that's, for me, I think the thing that if we can make a little difference and save even one company, to me, it makes this work worthwhile. I love as an entrepreneur to be incredibly financially successful and make a ton of money and make our investors a ton of money. And that is, I will say, a driver for me. But the biggest thing is seeing the owners succeed. Because at the end of the day, I feel like the world is better if we've done our jobs well.
Yeah. Yscaira, do you want to finish this up? What's kept you going?
Sure. I mean, I think for me, what keeps me going is what got me started. You know, I think about, I started this because of my brother, because of my nephew. And so whenever I see a job seeker, that's who I see. I see someone that I love, and I see someone whose future I'm very invested in. I think about my brother, my nephew, my nieces, and you know, and the transformative power of getting a good job. It shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone that a lot of young Latinx, Black, brown folks are oftentimes head of household. They're oftentimes taking care of their parents while trying to figure out if they can get educated. They need to work. And so I think back to like the first few people that we placed, you know, a young woman who didn't have a degree, who, you know, earlier had fought like housing insecurity. That's why she dropped out of school, because they were going to lose the house. So she had to start working. And then I remember when I checked back up on her, you know, it turned out that she was becoming a parent. And she said, I didn't have health insurance. Like this, you know, this is so critical. And my mom lost her job. So like I became the full head of household. And now because of me, my family can, you know, can do it. So it wasn't just about her, but now like, you know, this is trickling in all ways, up, down, and sideways. When people have security, job security, health security, you know, they can thrive. So, you know, it's the same thing that got me started, is I see the people that I serve as my family and people that I love, and it's the same thing that keeps me going. If not me, if not us, then who, right? Like, because these systems weren't designed for us to thrive. So to your point, Amanda, we need to blow them up, reimagine them, redesign them for the benefit of the people that we care about.
Yeah.
And also, just to piggyback on that for one quick second, I think it takes the idea of competition, frankly, away. We don't even spend time thinking about our competitors, because we're like, this is such a huge problem we're trying to solve. Bring it. Like, we want people to come join in. We want people to push forward and bring more attention to these problems. I think it's at the end of the day, yeah, it's about solving the problem more than anything.
Yeah, no, because a lot of the cracks that we were experiencing have now become chasms, to the point that there's no way we can like repave those cracks away. We really do need to create new systems. So I'm really proud to have met all three of you and to know all about your fantastic work. I want to say thank you for keeping going and for the engagement that you're having within the different communities that you're working with. And I want to say thank you to everybody who's watching us. I hope that you learned a little bit about entrepreneurship and what drives entrepreneurs. And how can people follow you on social media or anything else like that? If we can go quickly, Carolyn, would you be kind enough to start?
I'm most active on Twitter at Carolyn Rodz, or join me over at the Hello Alice community, where I am every day.
Yscaira?
You can find me at Yscaira. I'm like one of two people in this world with that name that I know of. And at LaborX Co on Twitter and on Facebook.
Yeah. Amanda?
Yeah, also Twitter is my home, and I'm at Amanda DoAmaral on Twitter.
Great. And I'm at Deldelp, D-E-L-D-E-L-P on Twitter, Deldelp Medina, D-E-L-D-L-P Medina. I'm the only person in the world with my name. You will always find me, so that's pretty easy. Thank you all. Thank you to LTX Fest for having us here, and take good care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.